Hello, this is Shari McGuire, Realtor, and I'm here today to bring you something new. And I'm going to be inviting different guests to be on here with me to just inform people about things that would be helpful if you're in that 55 plus age category. There's so many different things that we just don't even know about. And so today, for my first guest, I have with me Reine Kassulker. I hope I
Yes,
got that
very.
right.
That was perfect. Yes.
Oh, phew. And so Reen is joining me today. He's also a realtor with EXP, and he specializes in probate. And probate is something that it's like that magic word out there that people just don't even understand what it means and what it means to like put things in place so you can avoid probate too, if possible. And so I've invited him on as my guest today. Welcome, Reen.
Hey, thank you, Sherry. It's great to be here today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. So why don't you get started really with just sharing a little bit about your background and what led you to specialize in probate real estate?
Sure. I've been in real estate since the early 2000s as an investor, and I had my real estate license years ago. And then I took a little bit of time off when my children were young so that we could do all of the
Uh-oh. Can you see me? Oh, shoot. Are we both frozen?
Oh, there we go. I'm sorry. Did
Okay. Hey, that's okay.
All right. Um, so
I went with your
Sherry,
kids. With the kids,
yeah,
you
yeah,
you
yeah.
took time
So
off.
I'm sorry, let me just start real quick. So I
Mm.
had my real estate license early on and I owned some investment properties. I took some time off when my kids were younger. And what brought me back into real estate was when my dad passed away in 2018. I was the personal representative. And that was my introduction to probate, like it is for a lot of people. It's not something
Mhm.
you really plan for, or some people do actually, and good for them. But a lot of families don't plan for probate, and so I was drawn in as my dad's personal representative, and we had to clean out and sell the home that had been in our family for 3 generations. And so I learned a lot of lessons along the way, and today I share those lessons with other families going through
Mhm.
probate so that they can avoid some of the mistakes that my family made.
That's the best way, to learn from someone who's been there and done it and knows, okay, you really don't want to do it this way. Let's do it better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fantastic that you're willing to share that education with other people. We really appreciate it. So, what do you find most rewarding about working in this niche of real estate?
What I really like about working in this niche of real estate, first of all, for me, I don't think of it as working in real estate or doing real estate transactions. I think of myself as a probate specialist who has a real estate license so that I can offer the families I work with all of the options and choose the one that's best for them. I know there are some agents who think of probate as more of a transactional situation. For me,
Mhm.
it's opposite. I'm really just in it to help the families get through probate, and
Mhm.
typically part of probate is selling a family home. So
Sure.
that's
And
what
it's great.
what drew me to it, was really just helping those families.
Absolutely. I love it because someone with a heart, because that's a tough time. You've lost a loved one and now you've got this house to deal with, plus the estate. It's overwhelming. And you had 3 decades of a home. That's a
Right.
lot of home to clean out. Oh my gosh.
Yes. Uh-huh. Yes.
So, yeah.
And one of the tips I would add for people out there who might find themselves in a probate situation, when you are when you first find yourself, you've lost a loved one and you realize that you have to go through probate, or maybe you're not sure what the next steps are, and you're looking at this house and it's filled with memories and filled with personal property and maybe someone's collections and all these other things.
Mhm.
You might think that this is a unique situation, and then unfortunately you find out that it's really not. There are a lot of people who have been through this and can help you through it, but it's hard to find them and you don't really know where to reach out.
Sure. So, for those who are not necessarily familiar, what is probate real estate? What is all of that to help people understand it?
Absolutely. Probate, let's start with probate. Probate is when a person passes away and somebody has to essentially settle their estate or close all of their accounts, liquidate all their assets, pay all their debts. And there are 2 ways that this can happen. One is if they have a will, then you liquidate and settle their estate according to the will. And the common mistake people make is they think that if there is a will, they don't have to go through probate. That's actually not true. If there is a will, you do have to go through probate in order to execute the will. If there is no will, you still have to go through probate. And in that case, you would follow state law to settle the estate. And there are scenarios where probate can be avoided. One scenario would be if you do work in advance and set things up either through a trust or transfer on death or some of those other issues or tools, I should say. And then also, if the person has already passed away, you might be able to avoid probate if there's no real estate involved in the transaction, or in Minnesota if it's below 75,000, and each state has a different threshold. So there are ways that probate can be avoided. The easiest way to avoid probate is to set up a trust, and you're good to go.
Okay. And so you mentioned the transfer on death deed, the TOD, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people don't even know what that is. It would be helpful if you could explain that.
Sure. A transfer on death deed is essentially you go down to the recorder's office and you just fill out a form indicating that you want the deed to be transferred on death. So if it's your house and it's your deed, the title's in your name, you just fill it out and say, upon death, I want this to be transferred to whoever you want to your kids, whoever. And then you want to have it notarized. And then ask the recorder in your state and your county if you need to record it right away, or if you bring it back at the time of death. Each state's a little bit different, but some people miss the step and then it doesn't count. So just ask the county recorder to make sure that you're clear. And once you have that in place, then when the day comes that somebody passes away, you just go back down to the recorder's office with the copy of the death certificate. And if you have everything filled out properly from your transfer on death, they will transfer the deed into your name. That is a really good way to do it. Once you take the deed out of your name, out of the name of the deceased to put it into your name, then that's one less asset that counts towards that probate threshold, right? So that might be enough to help you avoid probate. Or if you have transfer on death on bank accounts or pay on death, some of those other things, that limits that threshold and can help a family to avoid probate.
Okay. Well, why don't you talk us through the typical steps if someone does need to go through probate and there's real estate involved?
Yes. The first step is it's really just coming to the realization that you have to go through probate. So often families think they don't have to go through probate either because there is a will, like I mentioned earlier, or if they had power of attorney, they might think they don't have to go through probate because they have power of attorney. And reality is power of attorney ends when a person passes away.
Right.
And so they find themselves in this really awkward situation because they had power of attorney when they were taking care of their loved one. Loved one passes away, they find out now they don't have power of attorney, and they really can't get that authority back until they file with the court and are going through the probate process. So what you would want to do, I typically recommend to contact an attorney. Some people like to do it without an attorney. And if you contact an attorney, let them know that you need to file probate or do a consultation to see if you have to. All right. And then either you or they would file with the court. You would have a court hearing, and during that hearing, if nobody contests, then the court will issue what are called letters testamentary or letters of administration. They're called different things in different states. Once you have those letters, that's kind of like your power of attorney, the probate version of power of attorney. And at that point, you're authorized to then start to liquidate assets and settle accounts and pay off debts on behalf of the person who passed away.
Okay. And how long can that take to get that all through the court?
Wow, that's a loaded question. It really, the probate process really varies due to several factors. Number one would be the city, not the city, but the county and the state that you're filing in. And you do file this with the county. And so if a person has property in a county, typically you have to file probate in that county. And if they were working in one county or had permanent residence, so for example, they moved to California to live with their kids and they own a house in Minnesota, if they establish permanent residence in California, they have to go through probate process in California if they qualify. as well as in Minnesota where they are selling the property. So sometimes you can have to go through probate in multiple states. So it's good to talk to an attorney and find out if you need to go through. And the process, it really depends on the county. It depends on the court docket and the backlog of cases they have. It depends if it's formal or informal. But just to give you an idea, some people can go through informally. I had one case where I was a special administrator and we didn't have to have an initial hearing. So we just, the attorney just sent everything to the judge. We had it signed within a couple of days. There are other scenarios where you have to wait to have your hearing and it could take a couple of months. Okay. And then if someone contests, the judge might push it out and it could take even longer. So it really depends on the case. What I encourage families to do, though, is start right away because you don't know how long it's going to take. And while you're trying to figure this out, it's possible that mortgage payments aren't being made on the house and the house can go into foreclosure.
And you don't want that. That's for sure. That would be a bad thing. So that's a great segue, I think, to my next question then about really, when is it a good time to reach out to a real estate agent to help with the sale of that home, though, to it, because that the mortgages are going unpaid perhaps, and keep people from making a mess of it.
I'm smiling because not every family appreciates the advice that I'm about to give. But as you said earlier, it's from the heart. And I recommend that you reach out to a real estate agent who understands probate process as soon as possible. But again, the caveat there is it really should be an agent who understands probate process. If you reach out to an agent who doesn't understand the probate process, they're going to do their best to help you, but they might not understand the steps you need to take and the sequence of events that need to occur. If you reach out to someone like me right away, we can analyze the situation and help guide you on the best decision. And with probate, there's not really a one size fits all, right? So there are a lot of options for selling your house. There are a lot of options for selling the personal property. And there's a sequence of events that you should go through to make it easier, depending on which of those paths you choose. And so if you decide, well, I'm going to go to court, I'm going to wait for the letters, wait till my attorney gives me the green light, wait for the judge, then we're going to get the house cleaned out, then we're going to talk to an agent. A lot of families do that and make it work, but it would be less stressful if you consulted with somebody right away.
Sure. And I want to emphasize someone who understands probate and experience with probate. It's a whole different animal from just, Sally down the street giving a call and say, hey, I want to sell my house. It's just a lot more to it. And so that expertise is so helpful, for sure. So let me look at my questions here. How do you help your clients overcome the challenges that they could run into and make the process smoother?
One of the things that I do a lot of things that are unique, actually. I have a 3-step process to help families tackle this and get through it with the least amount of stress. As part of that process, I will also help them with their family. So it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just a transaction for me. It's really helping this family to get through probate process. And part of that is dealing with family members. And for some personal representatives, they're under a lot of stress, and so are the other family members who are grieving. And if preserving relationships are important to them, then I will do some extra things that my attorney did for me, which were very helpful to try to help them preserve their relationships in addition to selling the house. So one example is a lot of times family will get into a tussle over whether they should sell to a cash buyer or put it on the MLS and sell for the most. They'll also have issues if one person wants to sell it to a family member and keep it in the family, and someone else wants to sell it for the most amount of money. So I come up with unique solutions where we can do both, right? So I'll notify the family right away when we're doing the planning, and I'll say, hey, family's planning on selling this house. And if there's anyone in the family who wants to buy it or keep it in the family, or you think it's being sold for an amount that's too low, or a million reasons why someone might not approve of the approach we're taking, you can buy the house, right? And but get qualified now, because when we are ready to sell, things are going to move quickly. And then we keep the family involved along the way. We give them a chance to match the best offers that are coming in, even if we put the house on MLS. And that way,
Mm.
if if we have an offer to sell a house for 300,000, someone in the family thinks it's worth 4, they can buy it for 300 minus their share of the inheritance.
Yeah,
So they
yeah.
might get that house, they might get the house they think is worth 400,000 for 150.
Hmm.
And the family, the estate is still satisfied and the court satisfied because we know that we got top dollar because we base that price off from the other offers that we brought in.
Sure. Oh, that's really interesting. That's great that you have that insight to help people think through that. Because, boy, it can get so ugly with family members, even just over like grandma's clock. I mean,
Right.
it's so sad. It's such a hard time to be fighting over things. So that sounds like a wonderful process to help them
It's
through.
it's like it's almost like a lightning rod. There will almost, if there are multiple family members involved, there will almost always be something that just triggers the emotions. And it
Mm,
might not even be about that thing, right?
yeah.
It might not be about
Yeah.
grandma's clock. It might just be the frustration that grandma's
Hmm.
gone. And
Yeah.
so I know that it could be coming at any time, and I do everything I can to try to mitigate that for the personal representative. Another
Yeah.
thing that we've done that has worked really well is a lot of times I will record all of my presentations for the family. So, for example, if we're going through the paperwork and we're talking about options to come up with our plan, I will record that and send it to everybody in the family so they understand all of the options and why
Oh,
we're going with the option. And I've had a lot of families come back to me and say that just being able to go back and look at those videos, and even when the offers come in, I'll record the offer presentation so that they can
okay.
see every offer and understand why we're recommending what we are. And it really saves a lot of just a lot of grief, right? We've done it. It's recorded. Everybody can see it. They can ask questions, and it just improves the communication process.
Absolutely. Everybody hears the same message.
Right.
100%. There's no one telling the other one. And then, they just don't, they leave things out or reinterpret things. And that's wonderful. What a great idea. I love it.
You
That
know
is
where that
awesome.
idea came from, Sherry?
Where is that?
I had a personal representative who was very young and would not meet with me in person. And so I
Yeah.
had to record everything and send it. He would watch the YouTube videos I would send him,
Oh,
but he wouldn't meet
funny.
with me. So
Okay.
we did that entire transaction text and YouTube. I think I only met with them in person maybe a couple of times.
Okay.
And they were so happy at the end. they were, they, you know,
Interesting.
they, yeah.
Well, you took what was a way to get through that transaction and turn it into something really good for everybody, just to keep everybody on the same page. And that, I think, makes a huge difference, I would imagine.
It seemed to. It seemed to, because that way, if someone, if one of the siblings had a question, they could direct the question to me and take some of the pressure off the
Hmm.
personal representative. And
Hmm.
and like you said, everybody heard the same thing at the same time,
Yeah,
and just made things a lot easier. But I
absolutely.
didn't realize that was the big. Later, when they wrote me a testimonial, they all raved about the YouTube videos, and I was like, I was just doing that to get the transaction done, right? Like,
Yeah.
but it
Well,
worked so
hey,
well, I incorporated it into all of my transactions.
well, that's awesome. I love it. How about a success story, a memorable experience from your career as a probate real estate agent?
Oh, success! Well, one was the family that I just mentioned, where they had the 19-year-old, and who was the personal representative, had never sold property.
Mm.
Another one that I would say was one of the most interesting cases was a case where my attorney wanted to hire me to be the personal representative because the lady who passed away had a will, and she had no immediate family. But the other
Mm.
people that she named two other people as executors in her will. They both passed away also.
Oh,
And so, and this is in Minnesota. So the the attorney wanted to secure the estate before winter came, right? He wanted to make sure that winter and squatters and all these other things.
hmm.
Um, but part of that job was they wanted me to serve in the role as the special administrator. So that was really interesting with my real estate broker. We had to figure out how we could do that under the current rules. And then
Okay.
also we also had to do some genealogy research and try to locate family members.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so we did find some family members, and it
Okay.
was very interesting work.
Oh, I bet. That sounds really cool. Um, yeah, wow. My brain just goes to a million different directions. I won't
Yeah.
take us there.
Well, and
But the
Sherry, that was
genealogy is cool.
well, what that was. You always hear these stories on TV where some attorney shows up and says, "Hey, your aunt just died, and you're going to get all this money." That's
Mhm.
literally what happened in
That's
this case.
yeah.
This
Oh,
lady
man, that
just ended up
yeah.
getting all this money. Yeah,
Oh my goodness. Wow. That's pretty cool for her, that you guys did all
absolutely.
that work. You know, it's interesting. If that family member existed, and no one did that work, what would have happened? Did the state keep the money or something from that person that
My
passed?
understanding, I have never, so this is the closest I've ever come to that happening.
Hmm.
My understanding is that the money would go into a trust, and
Okay.
then we would continue looking. And I don't know if
Oh,
there's a statutory period that at some point it gets. I don't know what happens to it after a certain amount of time, but
okay.
that's a great question. I need to look that up. I don't know the answer to
Yeah,
that one.
that's interesting. Maybe it goes on an unclaimed property list that they like print in the paper in the old days, and you go through and say, "Oh, look, there's my name." Like, I'll get that $100, or whatever.
Well, and we actually had the opposite problem. We found more errors than what we found multiple errors, and then
Hmm.
we had to go back and look at some of the state statute. The attorney did, but I got to learn what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so he had to go back and look at the state statutes and the Uniform Probate Code, I think it's called, and determine who the proper heirs would be, because
Oh,
there was a will, but all the heirs in the will had passed away.
mm-hmm. Interesting.
And so the question to the court was, do we go by the heirs in the will, or are we going by state law? And so then we had to go back and actually pull records for some of the other heirs who had passed away to determine what language was in their wills and in their estates as well.
Oh, interesting. So, like, let's say it was Bob that was named, and Bob passed
Mm-hmm.
away, and so then were you looking to say, okay, what did Bob do with his estate, and then maybe it should have
Yeah,
transferred that way?
right. Would Bob's inheritance go to Bob's heirs,
Uh huh.
or would it be split among the other heirs and the other branches of the family? Because we had to start with like the great grandparents and then drill down and locate
Okay.
multiple cousins and all of those. But in the end, the court decided that it was one person whose mother was the main beneficiary in the will.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, I
Sounds
was
like
really glad. I
fun.
was really glad I didn't have to make that decision.
Yeah, that would be a tough one for sure. But that's interesting. I didn't never think about stuff like that. That's pretty cool. What
Yeah,
would you? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say families think about those things all the time. That
Yeah, for sure. What advice would you give to someone who's been named the executor of an estate with real estate assets?
the first thing that I recommend, well, first thing, there's a couple of things. Number one, the first step that's always, or not always, often overlooked, is they don't secure the home fast enough. And by securing the home, there are two things that we're really talking about. The first thing is to make sure that the home is still insured. And the reason we bring
Mm,
that up is because a lot of times, if a house is vacant, someone passes away and the house is vacant, the current policy, there's a loophole in the policy, and the house is not covered if something happens.
okay.
And
Hmm.
so the family can buy a thing called a vacant policy, which would keep the vacant home insured, but it's a lot more expensive than the regular policy. And a
Hmm.
lot of times people just assume that because their mortgage payment is being escrowed with the insurance payment that they have insurance, but it's not always true. So you really got to call your insurance agent right away and make sure the home is insured, because a lot of times it's the largest asset, and there are
Yeah.
problems with squatters and people breaking in and stealing copper pipes and all of those other things. So,
Yeah.
and then the second part of securing the home, I recommend change the locks as fast as you can,
Okay.
because so many different people have keys to these homes. If it's an elderly person living in the home, they might give keys to some of their neighbors or someone who's
Hmm.
stopping to check on them, maybe someone that they used to work with. And almost every time I work on a probate home, people in the neighborhood show up with keys. A lot of times they're letting themselves in, and
Wow.
it's
And the
unbelievable.
garage code too, because you give that
Hmm.
to the maid or the landscaper, and got to get
Right.
all that changed. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
when people are cleaning out the house, usually they use the garage as an area to store everything, right? They're decluttering and
right.
they're just putting things in the garage, and
Hmm.
who knows how many people have access to that garage.
Yeah, excellent advice. That's good to know about that for sure. Um, how about let's see, how has the probate real estate market evolved in recent years? Anything that's kind of like changed for the better or worse?
Um, well, I've only been in the probate space since 2018, so I think one of the things I see changing for the better right now is a lot more real estate agents are getting educated on the probate process.
Okay.
And so there's a lot more training, there's national training, there are some certification programs now. And it just really makes me feel better about the industry when I see agents just wanting to understand the process, because knowing the process and having empathy are really critical to help a family
Hmm.
get through this. And I
Hmm.
really applaud, even if there's an agent out there who's never done a probate case, I really applaud them for at least taking some time to learn a little bit more about the process.
Hmm. Absolutely. That's great. Um, are there any tools, resources, or organizations you recommend for those looking to learn more about probate real estate?
Yeah, there's a company that I worked with, and they are called All the Leads, and they offer a certification course for some of the reasons I just mentioned. There were so many real estate agents or realtors who wanted to, they wanted to add this as another pillar of their business, right? So
Hmm.
they're doing expireds, they're doing for sale by owners, and then they figured, well, we'll just throw some numbers in a dialer and do probates too. Well,
Hmm.
dealing with a person who just lost a loved one who needs to sell is a lot different than dealing with a for sale by owner
Yeah,
or
it
someone
is.
whose home expired, right? They're all different. And so even though this is not a formal national certification program, they do a really great job of just helping agents understand the basics and some
Hmm.
of not only what an agent goes through, but really what the family's going through as well.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I've thought about that of like, finding people that need the help to sell the family home. And, you don't want to be that ambulance chaser,
Right,
with the insurance guy. This is the kind of like the ambulance chaser of real estate. Just no
right,
fun to say, hey, I heard your grandma died, and
right.
you have a house to sell. Like, that's just mean and rude, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, so better ways to do it for sure.
Absolutely. And now they have, so the way we learn about these cases, most of us, is through court records. So when you go to
Mm,
court and you file, that becomes public information, and then data companies and real estate agents and house buyers, all these people come and they either
mm,
get the data from the courthouse or they buy it.
mhm.
And so it's you end up on these lists and you get calls from some really rude some really rude people.
That's sad. That's
Yeah,
sad. Well, how can I have a couple other questions, but I don't want to forget to ask this. But how can people get in touch with you if they need assistance or have a question with probate property?
sure. The easiest way to get in touch with me is through email or text. I'll give you my number. I think it's probably going to be in the show notes as well. But you
Hmm.
could text me at 763-200-6290, and that's the fastest. You can also email me at reine.kassulker@gmail.com, and I'm not going to spell it out because it's very
It'll
long.
be, it'll be in the notes, so that'll be
Yeah.
good.
And then we also have we have a Facebook group, which is a community. We have a mix of real estate agents and also families who have lost a loved one. And we just get together and try to support each other and help each other out. And that is called Probate Help Desk, and it is on Facebook. So you could just,
Okay.
in the Facebook search, just type in Probate Help Desk, and we're the only one there.
Okay. Great. That's good to know too. I guess last two questions would be: what
Mhm.
motivates you to continue working in probate real estate?
For me, there's nothing more fulfilling than helping a family get through this, right? Like I mentioned, the
Mhm.
19-year-old who had no idea, really just needed someone to guide them through the process. And it's critical because I didn't mention this earlier, but when you start getting all these letters in the mail, there are a lot of options for selling your home. There are cash buyers, there
Mhm.
are iBuyers, there are real estate agents. There are all these different options you have. And when you really start to break it down, the real estate agent is the only person in the transaction who is professionally obligated to help you get the most for the sale of your home.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody else who's involved in the transaction, their job is to get the house for the least amount of money possible, right? A cash buyer's job is not to get you the most money for your house.
No.
Right?
They
That's
want
not
the
what
cheapest deal possible and rip you off,
they,
really.
yeah, they come in low, and so if you work with an agent who understands the process, knows who the buyers are, and can match your situation to the right option for selling your home, that's really where you not only maximize the value of the home, but you also can get through the process with a lot less stress.
Yeah, great. And I guess really any last thoughts that you want to share with us today?
First of all, I really appreciate being here, and
Mhm.
the again the best advice I can give is reach out to someone for help. Probate is such a difficult emotional. It's emotionally draining for the people that are personal representatives,
Mhm.
because they're not just dealing with selling the house. They are dealing with the loss of a loved one. They're still trying to have their normal life and take their kids to soccer practice.
Mhm.
They're still trying, and then they have to handle all the family dynamics of all the people in the family that are also frustrated, grieving, and angry. They have to sift through all the personal property, and they have all these legal obligations,
Yeah.
and all of that hitting them all in one shot. And it is such a an overwhelming and lonely feeling, but you don't have to go through it alone. There are people to support you, even if you decide not to work with a probate agent. Just talking to one and understanding your
Mhm.
options can be very helpful.
Absolutely. Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Rena. I appreciate you being on today, and I hope that people found that helpful. I know I certainly learned a lot. So thank you, and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Shari.
Bye.
Bye.